Good afternoon. So good to see everyone here. I think we thought we'd have to turn on the mic to get everybody in their seats, and all of a sudden it just got quiet and everybody sat down. And so you can tell we're among a lot of rule followers around here. So, but again, welcome to our accountability report to the public. It's great to have a large audience in attendance, and we have several practitioners here who will be part of panels, because what we really want to have today is a conversation, an information session, but a lot of conversation around our 2022 accountability results, with a focus on what can we learn, what can we do better, and how do we work together to make that happen. And so I'll start off with our initial group that we have. And of course, I don't think Secretary Johnny Key needs any introduction, but he and Deputy Commissioner Stacy Smith are going to help facilitate the discussion today. We have our 2022 Teacher of the Year. Did I get that date right? 2022 Teacher of the Year, Jessica Somm, who's going to be part of the panel. We have our Assistant Commissioner for Public School Accountability, Deb Kaufman. And we have Dr. Denise Arola, who works for the Office of Innovation and Education. And for anyone who has looked at their data, they probably have also either heard from Denise or talked to Denise or had support from her in some way. And so we'll spend the first few minutes just kind of going through a backdrop of where we've been and what our system is, and then we'll jump right in to dig into the results with some of our school principals. We'll have a break, and I've been told that if everybody doesn't get a plate and eat, you can't go home. So break time, we'll have a short break. We'll come back, hear from some of our superintendents, and then do feedback and quick question and answer. So we will, let me make sure here, I'm going to click on the right. So Abby, I might need some help on the clicker. Oh, okay. Now I need to go back. All right. So we're going to start out with the vision and mission for excellence in education. And we're starting here because this was the very beginning of our journey as a team at the Department of Education when Johnny Key became our Commissioner of Education in 2015. This was one of the very first steps he took, was to set the expectation that we needed a vision for excellence in education. And so Secretary Key, do you want to talk for just a minute about our vision and our mission and how it has helped to create this student-focused education?
Thank you, Dr. Pfeffer, and I want to thank the co-op here for allowing the use of the facility. It's a fantastic place, pretty centrally located, so that folks generally have a decent opportunity to get here. And I want to acknowledge our board members that are here, and also the members of our ESSA steering committee. ESSA, not ESSER. Remember, there was an ESSA before an ESSER. So this is part of our ongoing stakeholder engagement process, which is still an important part of the Every Student Succeeds Act. And yes, so in 2015, 2016, we, as an agency, pre-government transformation, we established and set on a journey of setting up a vision and mission that would guide us as an agency for what we wanted to do, where we wanted to go, and really wanted to have at the first level of everything we did was a student focus. And that started a process of rethinking at the agency. You know, what did that mean? And what did that mean with respect to accountability? What did that mean with respect to compliance? And where did we need to look for things in our operations that may have been more adult-focused rather than student-focused? Also within our systems, the number of systems that we have that impact students on a regular basis. But our mission was always and had been and continues to be providing leadership support and service. The work that we do at the agency is really is critical for supporting your efforts in educating students. And again, making sure that within our mission that we are focused all the time on helping remove barriers that are maybe within our systems that do get in the way or can get in the way, and really providing a lot of flexibility. Over the last several years, we've talked a lot about flexibility, and while we have flexibility, at the same time we have responsibility. And so all of the development that we have been engaged in really points to what are we doing for students. And within the student-focused system, you see students are at the center. And the 6 elements, major components of delivering a quality education to our students. It's not just about adequacy. We talk a lot about adequacy in Arkansas because that's the minimum standard. That's the legal minimum constitutional standard, but we don't want to settle for adequacy. We want to strive for excellence across the board. The report that we have today really is just another step in making sure that we are progressing toward excellence. And looking at, let's see, Ivy, I'm not sure where you're picking up with the numbers, but next slide starts enrollment. Is that where you're going to pick up? All right.
Yes.
Let me just finish by saying our goal is that every student is progressing and succeeding. Every student in Arkansas. And so when we don't stand still, even though COVID took a lot of momentum away from where we were headed and what we were doing, our destination is still the same. And the things that we're going to talk about today, and what I hope you are talking about in your districts with your boards, with your community, is how do we make sure that we're progressing in the direction we were going before, and that COVID may have interrupted, but it's not a detour. And any delay we had, we need to figure out a way to accelerate it. And the data that we're going to be going over today should help give us an indication of what do our kids need to accelerate to get us back on track moving toward that goal of excellence.
Okay. And just talking a little bit about the impact of the last couple of years, you can see where the big decline in the overall enrollment of students. We, in the fall of 2020, we dropped significantly. I think the overall number was over 6,000 fewer students in the fall of 2020 from where we had been the prior year. You can see in the fall of 21, there was some rebound, but again, I think it's a good reminder that when we started school in the fall of 21, we were starting amid a variant wave of COVID, and so we were still, in a lot of ways, fighting to try to get back to what we would feel was more normal. This year, though, you can see that last mark, we are up over 2,700 students from where we began last year. So again, signs of rebounds in enrollment. Those enrollment numbers also, I think, are reflective too of students who chose different learning options. So we know in the fall of 2020, even though we did have the majority of our students on campus every day, we had a lot of students who began the year at least learning virtually. There are fewer now that have chosen an all virtual option versus being on site. But just kind of that reminder, and as we reflect on all these pieces of data, that these things have changed the landscape of education over the last couple of years. And as we continue to look at that rebound, as Secretary Key mentioned, we have to keep looking at all students and every student. And what is it that those students need to be successful? This slide may be a little harder to see, but it's a screenshot from our website where we've just got an overall picture. And what I wanted to kind of show here, when we're talking about school accountability, I think a lot of times we think about a school district and we have, I believe it's 259 school districts. But when you break that down into school buildings, we have 1,056 different school buildings that our children attend every day. And so that's 1,056 different different cultures, different leaders in school buildings, different groups of teachers, different dynamics, different drop-offs for transportation, different places where students get their meals. And so that, going back to that the slide that showed those 6 systems with students in the center, we have a big job and we have a big responsibility to our students. And so we want to keep focusing on that and really be sure that we are looking at the data and using it to make good decisions. And sometimes the decision that gets made for one school in one district could be different. The needs are going to be different even among schools in that district. Another kind of, I guess, a dynamic challenge that we've seen over the last year or over the last few years are the percent of students who are at risk for chronic absences. And so we know that in the 2020-2021 school year, we know there were a lot of disruptions, and so the actual attendance of students was probably different there, just because there were a lot of day schools had to be closed. But when you go back and look at the 2022 data from last year, you can see that it's almost a lagging indicator from the pandemic. That challenge of, okay, let's get back to this normal routine. Let's get back to, yes, we do need to be at school in person, because we know that especially our youngest learners suffered the most. Our students with disabilities suffered the most when they didn't have that consistency. So I wanted to pause here for just a minute and let some of our team here talk a little bit. Jessica, thinking back to last school year and thinking back to maybe what you saw, maybe not with just your students, but maybe your own children and others. Can you talk a little bit about what maybe did you all see similar trends in your school?
Absolutely, and I think part of the issue was an attitude towards attendance, and we had become so used to being able to provide a student access to their learning through Google Classroom and all these things that we needed. We needed to have those options for students, but parents would be taking their children out of town, going on a family vacation, and say, well, can you just upload the work onto Google Classroom and we'll get caught up? We know that's not the same. That is a great option for them to have access, but that is not replacing in-classroom learning and those experiences that students need. And so I really saw that, I think, across most settings, and especially with youngest learners, that it's just, you know, they're just in elementary school. These classes aren't counting towards graduation for college preparation. And so if we miss, they can get some work to get caught up. I can just email the teacher, text the teacher, the work's online, and they can access it. And so I really do think parents may not even know, teachers don't always know how this counts towards our scores and how important this attendance factor is for schools and parents, especially with some of our youngest learners. It's easy to think, oh, we can take a couple of days and they'll be fine and get caught up. And so I definitely think we'd become so used to students having to miss, for whether it be quarantine or actually being sick, that when it came time that they weren't having to miss, but we were able to provide other ways for them to learn and stay engaged, we were comfortable with taking those options instead of being more insistent on them being in class and learning the way they need to be learning.
So, I think it's just a good reminder of really being clear about what our focus is, and really be clear about the impact that it does have on students, and especially those young learners. Another area that has been a challenge has been in continuing to have teachers who are well prepared, who are experienced, who are teaching in the area where they are prepared. And so this picture here shows in red those districts that have 10% or more of their teachers who are working under a waiver, working under some kind of a provisional license. And we know that COVID exacerbated the need for teachers. We started seeing the year after COVID higher rates of teacher attrition in districts. So that has been an ongoing challenge that we're continuing to address. We do expect over the next few months to have a lot of positive news about the teacher pipeline refilling. And but again, we know that districts have continued to have that as a challenge. And so all of those things are important and contribute in addition to the student test results as part of our overall accountability system. And I'm going to pause and let Ms. Kaufman talk a little bit about the information on this slide, because this slide depicts the alignment, the change in our accountability system that began in, I believe, 2017. And so she's going to talk just a little bit about that, because all three parts are important and are going to be discussed today.
Thank you. One of the things that I think is important here to remember is that when we started this work, we went around across the state, stakeholder meetings all over the state, and asked our stakeholders, what do you want to see in an accountability system? And while we did have guidelines from US Ed about the need to be reliable and valid in our data accountability, we also needed to hear from the general public about what they expected of public schools. And overwhelmingly, across the state, people said, whatever we end up with, it needs to be aligned. We don't want a different federal from a different state, from a different letter grade. And so as a result of that, we wrote our ESSA School Index into our comprehensive application that we submitted to the feds. That's been out many times for public feedback and has been updated and revised as needed through the pandemic. As a result of that, then if you look at our state accountability, it aligns right with that. And then finally, we did 11 days, wasn't it? 7 days? How many was it? It's been so long ago. A to F. We did 7 days. 7 days of bringing in stakeholders, a new group every day, to do the standard setting for A to F. And that, and again, is exactly how we were advised by our technical advisory committee to determine those cut scores for A to F, and it was done by a wide variety of people, many of you in the room today, and many others. So we're really proud of the system, but we also invite feedback, and of course, we prepare to be ready to revise in the future.
So on this next, as we were thinking about the design, the accountability was designed based on a theory of action that leads into a continuous cycle of inquiry. So Denise, just really briefly, do you want to talk about why a theory of action leading into that? Why was that important?
The whole idea behind the data is, and the system, the accountability system, is that you've got this high-level system that gets you started, digging deeper into your local system. It's a way of starting with this high level of information and actually asking questions about your local why. So what you see in the accountability system is intended to help you generate questions that take you deeper into your own system to answer. And one of the most evidence-based ways to answer those local questions is to engage in a continuous cycle of inquiry, where you wonder why you're getting what you're getting that you see in your data, what could be the things that are causing that. You hypothesize about what you could do to address it. You try those things out, and then you collect information locally to see if it's making a difference. And then with the annual accountability, you have a chance to calibrate against that with a different source of information. So it's really intended to drive local improvement.
And so that local improvement begins this month with the issuance of the school index. We will also be looking at identifying schools that are going to need comprehensive support. That's part of our accountability system. There'll be additional information that comes out in the school report card in December. And and then in April, all of the final information. And again, information about teachers in the classroom, information about student performance on multiple measures, information about several different school quality indicators. All of those pieces of data are part of not just the information we have today, but will ultimately be part of our school report card. And the system for reporting this is kind of our hub for all the information that goes in. My School Info, probably a familiar site, but for those of you, we will have the presentation available, and we have links that will take you wherever you need to be to find the information that you need. And so when we really get in and start digging into what this is all about, it's really about making sure that we have a system that allows all students to have access and opportunities for a high quality education and to continue to try to close those gaps. One of the gaps that we've seen in Arkansas for some time, going back to our original data slide, we still have about 64% of our students who are considered economically disadvantaged based on their status. And that is, I mean, the majority of our public school students are struggling with forms of poverty. And we know there is a relationship, a negative relationship between achievement and poverty. And you can see that here in terms of the higher the percentage of students who receive free and reduced lunch, you see the trend line downward in terms of achievement. And you might look at that and think, oh my goodness, if you have a poor student, they're not going to be successful, but that's not it at all. And even if you have a school with a lot of students who may be economically disadvantaged, you can see here from this chart, if you look, and I don't know if I have a laser, but you can still see that there are schools on this far right side who have high percentages of students in poverty, but are also having a high ESSA school index score. And so part of that cycle of inquiry is, and I think that's where we come in at the state level, is making sure this information is there and we're looking at what's going on in those schools. You're going to be able to hear from some schools today. You'll be able to see those schools in My School Info because there are some schools that are being very successful who have students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. You can also see that, there's a relatively small percentage of schools that have low poverty, but there are schools with high poverty that are outperforming. So we want to continue to make sure that our system is accounting for that. And that's why when you go in and we talk about every student, our subgroup data is as prominent as the all student data. And those subgroup data are also considered when we're looking at not just comprehensive support improvement, but also additional support or additional targeted support. So as we get into talking about the data, I do want us to take just a moment to pause on this slide here because it's talking about state participation, not just in last year's assessment, but the year before. And I want to pause here for just a second and ask Denise to comment on why this is significant and why it's important to help us feel, I don't know, I want to say feel good about our results, but feel confident with our results.
In order for us to feel that we can adequately compare results from prior years to the results we're getting now, we need to know that we're working with a very similar percent of students tested. So for most of our indicators that are based on the assessment, having over 95% tested allows us to say at the state level, hey, these are comparable numbers that can tell us about where we are relative to where we expected to be, what is the extent of our impact from the pandemic, and are we starting to rebound towards recovery? So percent tested makes it something that we do feel confident that we're looking at results that can give us good information.
And as we look at a summary of these results, we have some of the things bulleted out here. I know our press release will have this in more detail. We'll have follow-up information where you can really see all of this. But Secretary Key, we were at a conference last week where with a lot of other state chiefs and commissioners, and they were talking about some of their accountability results. And my takeaway is that there are not a lot of states that are doing what we're doing and really taking that honest look at where are we now compared to based on the things that have happened over the last couple of years and where we were. But can you talk just for a minute about what you see when you look at these results, and then reflect on maybe what our counterparts in other states may or may not be doing?
So I think in other states you're seeing a lot of generalization. I don't think their data systems can really, they're not finely tuned enough to really get down to the level that we can here. And that's one of the benefits, I think, of the system we've developed. And you know, another observation from talking to some of the other states, you know, no one is unique. They're all fighting the same issues. The challenges that they have are, and in some of the states, really this is the first school year that they could say they are back to any type of regular on-site instruction. So their struggles have been much different. But the net impact on students has been similar. The other thing that I've noticed, and this is where you have to balance that between student-focused and adult-focused. Some states have created this artificial floor, basically, that says for a school, we're not going to let you go below this rating. Now, it doesn't matter what the results say. It's like you're not going to go below this, and that's so we don't feel too bad about. I mean, that's what I took from it. We don't, Ivy, correct me if I'm wrong, I may be a little too blunt there, but it's like we don't want folks to feel bad about it. Well, you know, it's one thing to feel bad, but it's one thing to feel bad enough to do something to make it change. All right, and that's what I think we can do with our data system here is we can get down to the student level to know skill by skill what students need, what they're missing, and we have the things in place like Arkansas Tutoring Corps, many of the other elements that we've put forward with through the ESSER funds to address those needs. So I think I feel like based on those conversations, Arkansas is poised to make some great strides in accelerating for our kids.
And part of looking at that is also celebrating the things that are going well. And so, Ms. Kaufman, we are continuing to have Schools on the Move. Can you give us just a brief update on what that is? And we'll get our principals up here and get ready to start talking.
All right, Schools on the Move is an opportunity to celebrate. Sometimes we think about only the monetary celebrations that come with our scores, but our school districts have done amazing work. And when we look at the number of schools that improved their overall ESSA index score, when you're looking at 621 schools went up post-pandemic, and 68 of those schools improved their score by 5 or more points. That's hard work, and it should be celebrated. And that, I think, is the opportunity with Schools on the Move is another way to celebrate. In addition to that, we had 50 schools that improved their letter grades, and that kind of culminates all of that hard work into one letter grade. But if you will go to our Schools on the Move page, we see a lot of celebrations for a lot of very worthy schools. And then we have our school recognition program, which is where the money comes in, and we will be recognizing 178 schools with a little over $6.8 million spread out among those schools. 78 of those schools received additional funding because of their performance. 77 received funding because of their growth, and 23 schools received funding for performance and growth. So people can say a lot of bad things about letter grades and things like that, but we do have proof that schools are making amazing progress.
All right, so it's time to dig into the results, and we're going to have our principal panel come on up and sit here. Ms. Smith is going to facilitate this conversation, so I'm going to hand you all the mic, and she's got some questions, and we're eager to hear some of your stories.
Is this working? Here we go. Good afternoon. Glad to be here. And I have to thank my partner, Ivy, there for giving me the best part of the whole agenda. I get to talk to the school folks. That's the best part. But what I was really thinking when I was sitting reflecting and I was looking around the room, first I noticed Anthony Bennett sitting over here. And I literally leaned over to Commissioner Key because I'm sitting here thinking, I can remember when he stood up before the state board as a high school student presenting, and my, you've grown up, and here you are in this room today of education leaders to talk. And then I look over here and I see Harold Jeffcoat, and all I can think about is 5th grade kickball. So we taught together back in the 90s and how intense that was. And then I look over here and I see Jeremy, and all I can think about is you and I on a plane going to New Orleans, and we were the vision of what professional learning would be like in this state and all the changes there. And then behind me, you've got Miss Newton here, who I can remember being director of curriculum instruction when she was named Teacher of the Year from a small school, and I was wowed by her. And so it's amazing to think when we look around this room, I see friends and I see educators and I see people who deeply care about kids. So while we're talking about letter grades and while we're talking about ESSA School Index and accountability, everybody in this room cares about kids, and we know that. So thank you, everybody in this room, for what you do. So digging into the data, ESSA School Index. So Deb, we're going to get to this one slide about each student counts, and I just want you to give a big overview of what our accountability system looks like as a whole.
And that really is the key. Each student counts. And so when we start running this data, we start with each student. So when we look at this, it doesn't break down to excluding kids, it's each student. And that was because our stakeholders asked for that.
Deb, on this, or Denise, on this right here, this overall ESSA School Index and state averages, any comments you want to make, Denise or Deb, regarding, what you see over the years?
Just that, we are really only 4 years into this system, and 2 of those years have been spent trying to recover from a pandemic. And yet, when I look at those differences, I'm actually heartened by how we are beginning to rebound from what has happened, knowing that all the different pieces that make it up, we have the information we need to make sure we get to that point of recovery just through looking at this. But when I look at this, I look at where has everyone been. Elementary definitely took a very hard hit in 2021, but they're starting to move back. And now we have some clearly defined things that we can start looking at that are based on what we see in our data.
Okay, so Eureka Springs Elementary. So we'll pass the microphone over to Claire, and I want to note for those of you in the room, you're about to be wowed here. Eureka Springs Elementary School is recognized in 2022 for increasing their letter grade from a C to a B and improving their weighted achievement score by 14 points in 21 to 22. Give her a hand. Absolutely. Brian Pruitt is your superintendent, and Claire, I'm going to let you say your last name for everyone.
I'm Claire Houses.
Houses.
Yes.
I didn't want to butcher that, and I was sure I was going to. And being the Rice person, I probably shouldn't butcher it, but we'll stop there. So I do know that Eureka Springs participated in professional learning communities. So talk to us a little bit about how professional learning communities played a role in what you saw in your student achievement.
Absolutely. Well, we were in a unique position when the pandemic started. We had been selected to participate in the PLCs at Work process, the project, as part of cohort 3. Beginning in the fall of 2019. And so we were just getting into the work when school closed. And so we were trying to balance online instruction as well as all of the coaching and job embedded professional development with our Solution Tree coaching team. And so fortunately, we had already started some of the work, and we had begun addressing question 1, which is what do we want students to know and be able to do? And so we had been digging deep into our standards and identifying what was essential and what level of rigor were we expecting in our classrooms as grade level teams. And so that really helped us to get tight on what we wanted students to learn, which led us really into assessing our students using common formative assessments and being able to assess our kids, whether they were on site or learning online as we moved into the 2021 school year, was just a huge help for us, knowing that we needed to either intervene with students or provide extension opportunities, meeting students where they were, and then having a plan in place to get them to grade level instruction. The learning progressions that we created for each standard were just hugely helpful, creating those learning targets and starting wherever a child is and progressing toward the grade level standard as a team, and of course working collaboratively to meet those needs.
To really get that kind of growth or achievement that you met, you really had to get to an individualized student focus.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
tell us a little bit about that.
So we now, we used to have a lot of data and we weren't really sure what to do with it. And so working together collaboratively, we were able to get down to a student by student, skill by skill plan for every kid. And so teachers used to say, oh, I don't think my kids did too well on this particular, unit of instruction. And now we know which kids have it, which kids need some more support, whether that's at a tier 2 level in the classroom or building those foundational skills at a tier 3 level.
Thank you. And I believe we're going to get to Eureka Springs High School a little bit later in the presentation. So now we're going to talk about Grace Hill Elementary. And fortunately, several people from ADE actually got to come and visit your school recently, and we were blown away. Here's what we know about Grace Hill. Grace Hill Elementary was recognized as a 2022 feature school moving towards excellence for the following accomplishment: increasing by 1 letter grade and increasing their overall ESSA School Index score by 6.23 points from 2019 to 2022. Grace Hill also exited additional targeted support and improvement for the students with disabilities subgroup for 2021, which is huge, and that a lot of that had to do with inclusive practices work. So Christina, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself to everyone real quick.
I'm Christina Meister. I'm the principal at Grace Hill. Just a little bit about our school. We're in Rogers School District. We have about 78% free and reduced lunch, about 51% English language learners. And this is my 4th year as principal at that school. When we first started the process of making improvements to our school, we started with our school culture. We wanted to create a culture where all of the teachers and staff members truly believe that all kids can learn at high levels. And we had to start by looking in the mirror at ourselves and thinking, what can we do to make a difference instructionally, instead of blaming all the circumstances surrounding, well, they come from poverty, or they don't speak the language, or they're coming to school hungry. Yes, all of those things may be true, but we had to find ways to address those needs and keep learning the focus of what we were doing. So my first year at Grace Hill was the year of COVID, And so everything shut down at the end of that year. And about that time was an opportunity came my way to apply for the Inclusive Practices Project, which is a partnership with Solution Tree and the Department of Education. So we were in the first cohort, and we were selected to participate in that project. And so because we were all coming back after COVID and we had to keep students separated, we had to we had a lot of kids that went virtual. Our coaches with Solution Tree were not able to come in person to do the coaching with us. So a lot of what we did was all virtual. But we just started with the just digging into data and starting with an intentional focus on kid by kid data. Prior to that year, we had a big focus on our foundational reading universal screeners, and we said every kid in this building is going to have a small group in reading, and we are all going to follow the science of reading learning that we have to plan those groups out. And so each kid was put in a group based on whatever they needed.
Tell me a little bit about, so that mindset that your school shifted in inclusion and those practices and how that transformed your culture in your building. Talk us a little bit more about that, because I know that's the inclusive practice of piece is a piece that a lot of people are struggling with right now. So talk us through that a little bit.
We started by just looking at the way we were, like our master schedule, for example. We made sure that none of our students who had disabilities were pulled out of core instruction. So they could not be pulled out of core reading or core math to get those services. So we had to find time in the master schedule where when those students were pulled, it was at a time where they were not also missing core instruction. That was a first piece. A second piece of that was making sure that our students had access when they were in the classroom, they could access the core instruction. So if you're putting complex text in front of a student that is 2, 3, 4 grade levels below grade level, what are the scaffolds you need to put in place to help them access that? And then the biggest piece for us was, though, is not jumping in too early to over scaffold for those kids and letting them have productive struggle before we just sweep in and make it easy for them. That was huge for us.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I see Dr. Perry over there in the corner. And so Superintendent of Rogers School District, welcome. We're glad you're here. Let's move on to our next district or our next school. So we've got Mountain Pine High School. And our principal, I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself real quick.
Yes, my name is James Galarza. I'm a high school principal at Mountain Pine. This is my second year.
We're glad you're here today. Mountain Pine High School was recognized as a 2022 feature school on the move towards excellence for the following accomplishment: increasing by 1 letter grade and increasing their overall ESSA School Index score by 5.54 points from 2019 to 2022. Mountain Pine High School also exited comprehensive support and improvement for graduation rate of 2021. So congratulations on that. So I know Mountain Pine with your CTE program, and you've done some high school investments in your areas with community partnerships around that area. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes, that is correct. We offer CTE classes that we think benefits our community and our students. Our student population, like most schools, are high poverty, and we think that the focus on them being able to do things in which they think are applicable in life not only gets them to school, but gives them an opportunity to excel in something that they want and enjoy.
So just being able, so Mountain Pine, you're not like in the major city there. So how are you accomplishing that?
No, we're not. We visit with the local businesses, like a Window Mart that has come in a couple years ago with a Mountain Pine graduate. We reached out, like in Hot Springs, to another business that has actually promised, and we're working with currently, to upgrade our lab system for chemistry and get some people to come in and show the students. We passed a millage a couple years ago, and we had our Agri building completed that really benefited our student population. And I mean, I can go on with examples and examples. We had one student that definitely we thought we were going to lose about the 7th and 8th grade, and he'd be proud if he could hear me talk of him. But
Student focused on a career path.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I'm going back to what Mr. Key had mentioned earlier about student-centered and focus, and then the absenteeism. We think with our CTE programs, it keeps our students involved. They want to be there. We still have a couple of absentee issues, but them being able to take Agri, to go to the fairgrounds and show their animals, to work on computer programming. And we've got a great partnership with National Park College as well, where we send students there for mechanics and MedPro and things like that. And we've seen the benefit of it.
Well, congratulations. Thanks for sharing.
Yes,
If you'll
ma'am.
pass the microphone right back here to Deb and Denise real quick. So we're going to roll over into the weighted achievement discussion. And so this is one section in our accountability system that really carries a bulk of the system, right? So talk to us a little bit about weighted achievement.
So weighted achievement is 15% of our 35% of our score. I said that, it didn't make sense. 35% of our score. But what's really, I think, exciting about the way our stakeholders asked us to look at this is it really rewards the concept of moving students forward. So if you're moving them out of in need of support too close, then you start immediately getting points. And the more we're moving kids toward ready and exceeding, then the more points available. And we see that in our state averages.
Yeah, I think that can't be understated. In our old system, it was just, did you make it across the ready line? And that meant that there were sometimes focuses on just those kids that were close to getting over the ready line. In this case, each and every child counts. And you are incentivized to move those kids who need the most support to the next level, and you get points for that. The same when they move over the ready, and the same when they move over into exceeding. And that is a critical difference between how we used to have things in accountability before and how they are now, because it really incentivizes each and every child, no matter where they are on that continuum of achievement, to help them move along. We can't leave anybody behind in this case.
I just wanted to add to that. As a special education teacher, I've spoken to it a lot, but all too often our expectations for those students, their achievement is so low. And so when I hear the talk and when I've seen the schools, being in Grace Hill, walking into the classrooms, not being able to identify who is the special education teacher, who are the students receiving those special education services, and how that work with the PLC programs and the inclusive practices ties together, the growth we can see with our students who have been receiving special education services and are now being taught by those content teachers, they're being given access to that curriculum, their growth is going to be huge, and it's going to impact these scores. So when we start providing them what they deserve and what they need, the growth is going to be there, they're going to be more successful, and it's so beneficial. So the work that both these schools are doing, that all these schools participating, we are going to see awesome things for our students when we provide them those opportunities and when they start learning and achieving at the rates we know they can. Thanks.
That's Jessica Somm, our 2022 Teacher of the Year. All right, Schools on the Move. Deb, that's right. You hit that soapbox. Go ahead.
So
Schools on the Move. Deb, go ahead and talk about this.
Once again, I just think we cannot speak enough to the progress that our schools are making. And we look at weighted achievement especially, 74% of our schools increased their weighted achievement scores. And I just want to bring that out that some of them did it by 10 or more points. That's by moving individual kids up on those different levels. So congratulations, school districts.
So let's feature one of those schools right now. We've got Sylvan Hills Elementary, and we've got Principal Brittany Hickman, correct? Brittany, we're glad you're here.
Thank you so much.
Let me read your bragging real quick. Here a sec. Sylvan Hills Elementary increased by one letter grade, increasing their overall ESSA School Index score by 5.7 points. Sylvan Hills Elementary also is recognized for increasing their overall ESSA School Index score by 13.1 points. You nod that head. Yeah. Yes. and improving, I'll get this one, and improving their weighted achievement score by 22.08 points. Congratulations. So tell us how Sylvan Hills Elementary used data within your subgroups to kind of meet the needs for those individual students?
Great question. I first want to say thank you for the opportunity, and I want to wave at the staff and students because they are watching right now in the classroom, and we are ready to celebrate. We are so excited. So, data. Every student had an individualized action plan. We met with every student individually often after every assessment. So I have a favorite quote. My favorite quote is to always start with the end in mind. So when you look at the board, you see that 62.54. And at the beginning of the year, we knew that that was not a direct reflection of what we could possibly do academically. So we set those expectations for the staff, but not only for the staff, for the students. And with those high expectations, we didn't just set the expectation and leave the students hanging. We provided the students with an ample amount of support to help them meet their goals. It didn't matter if the student had a 504 or an IEP. Every student had the opportunity and did make progress and growth. So with that, we had data talks. So every student had a data template. On the data template, each member of our instructional staff met with the students. We talked about their NWEA scores and their RIT scores and what the RIT needed to be and how could we help them get there. We looked at their AR scores. We looked at their writing samples. Anything that you can think of, anything that we assess, you know how we say assess, assess, assess. We actually looked at it with them. And a lot of times we look at those assessments with the teachers, but we leave out the students. So we involved everybody, parents included, in the process. And because we were year 4 of the RTI at Work program, we started a guiding coalition. And with the guiding coalition, we implemented the WIN program at our school, which stands for What I Need. So for the students, they received individualized instruction on their level for 30 minutes a day, 3 days a week. And we did that with math and reading, and we believe that had major, that impacted our score and our achievement.
I think the power in involving your kids, and let me remind you, you're elementary.
Yes.
And so your elementary kids responded to talking to them about their data and what they needed. So when our state, we have that requirement for student success plans starting in like 8th grade, but you really have done that in the elementary.
Yes.
And it's paid off.
And we celebrate every milestone, any type of achievement, small or large, we celebrate their progress.
Congratulations. Thank you for
so
being
much.
here today. All right, next school that we want to recognize is Midland Elementary. Principal, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Benay Maherd.
Benay Maherd, welcome. We're glad you're here. Let me brag about you. Increasing by 1 letter grade, increasing their overall ESSA index score by 6.28 points. And Midland Elementary also was recognized for improving their weighted achievement score by 14.26 points. Congratulations. Big deal. So talk to us about the strategy you used to meet the needs of individual students and how you differentiated.
I think I first have to back up to the 2018-19 school year because that was a very difficult year for us aside from COVID. And we went back into then the 19-20 school year with a complete reset. We devoted a lot of time that summer and in preparing for our students to come back in what do they really need from us. And they had been alone and at home, and they needed to be off of social media and to reconnect with people. And so we went back into that next school year really devoting a lot of time and pushing hard on our social emotional learning. And we put 2 big things in place for us that helped us to reset our students and our faculty and staff and regrow our culture and become a school family again, because we're a very small school district and so our students need us tremendously. We did, like my Sylvan Hills partner over here, we had a heavy focus as well on individual student needs, and each time they took a MAP assessment or some other type of assessment like that, teachers went over those results with students, and the students were running to the office or coming down the hallway to find me to show me what their growth was. I went through 2 boxes of My Principal is Proud of Me pencils last school year because the students were that involved in tracking their own growth. They kept up with it and they tracked it themselves. And so we felt like what we were doing was working well because we incentivized our kids and we knew they could do a great job, and they proved that they could.
When you started the year really going back saying we got to focus on what kids need, did people feel like you were putting more on their plate?
I don't think that our teachers did, because they fully, not only did they embrace that, they embraced brand new curriculum across the board. They embraced curriculum, they embraced a new social emotional learning curriculum that went K-12 for us, and not at one time did anyone say, we have too much going on, we can't take on any one new thing. They took it on and they did tremendous, and they deserve to be credited for what they did.
Well, congratulations and thank you for being here. We're going to move on to value-added growth. And Deb and Denise, I'm going to slide back to you. I know, Denise, you commented earlier when I said I was going to ask you a growth question. You said, oh, my favorite part. So tell us why this is your favorite.
It's my favorite because when we were working on the ESSA accountability system, we'd been hearing from stakeholders that, we do have a lot of schools at 63, 64% poverty in the state. We have a lot of students who walk through our door that come with their own challenges, and we want a way to recognize when those kids are moving and improving that isn't tied strictly directly to achievement, because we know there's this negative relationship with achievement. And what growth does, what you can't see here is what's behind the scene. What you see here is growth is relatively stable, but behind the scenes of this are varied scores across schools. And what those schools are learning from their growth score is the extent to which they're helping each and every child make the progress they're expected to make in achievement each year. And behind the scenes of that is a way to do it so that it really is student focused in each and every child. So when you look at your growth scores, and when you can celebrate really high growth scores, you know that your kids are going above and beyond, that they're meeting or exceeding what they were expected to do based on where they've been, which is different from straight achievement, which is everybody has the same line that they have to meet. In this case, it's really looking at, are we moving each and every kid? And for schools, it means when you do, you get credit for that, whether they cross over a readiness level or not. If they are meeting or exceeding their growth, you're getting credit for that.
So you in the audience can't hear, but every time Denise is making a statement, Jessica is sitting here going, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So did you have something you'd like to add?
No, I think that growth is just such an important piece, and it's not recognized enough. I know students that were served in my class seeing some of their growth when they were given the opportunity to achieve, when their value was seen. And as an educator, that feels so amazing. But hearing how we can let students know that, hearing my own children, our school that they attend, they were talking about attendance and how important it is, because that was a struggle in our school. And I said something to my daughter. She got to go to an event with me yesterday, and she said, I can't miss school. I said, it's okay, it's at another school. We're still doing a school event, but that importance of attendance, involving children in these things that impact them, it's their future. It's their today. And so these are really important things, but I think the growth is definitely not celebrated enough. And as educators, we need to value that, and we need to make sure our students understand you are growing and you're on your way to better things. So.
Definitely worth it. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about some schools real quick. Go ahead, Deb.
So Stacy, 53% of our schools earned 80 or more in growth, and that's super exciting. In fact, 24 of our schools scored 2 standard deviations above the mean. So when we're striving to get to that 80 average, we've got schools that are going well beyond that. And I just encourage our communities to celebrate that work.
Okay, so let's talk about from Van Buren School District, Parkview Elementary. I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
My name is Mary McCutcheon, and this is my third year at Parkview.
Okay, well, Parkview Elementaries, let me brag on you for a minute. So increased a letter grade from a C to a B, and Parkview has demonstrated growth for 2 consecutive years through a pandemic. We're going to pause there. 2 consecutive years through a pandemic showed growth. Absolutely. So talk to us about your school improvement focus to achieve the results, to have growth in 2 consecutive years through a pandemic.
Well, I'll back up to the beginning of last year. About 3 weeks before we opened school, we had a fire at our school, and we lost everything in our building except for our desk and chairs. So starting that year off, we had, and Dr. Jeff Cope, bless his heart, he tried everything he could to try to get us our materials and supplies, but he couldn't control the supply chain. So we started our year with very few things. So we wanted to stay focused on what we're going to do this year. And we knew as a staff, we strongly believe that it's our task to evaluate how impactful our teaching is on student learning. So we really wanted to pull out some areas that we wanted to focus on. It's very easy for us to sometimes focus on too many things, and therefore you're not focused on anything. So we really wanted to focus on, and we did, focus on student engagement and motivation. We stayed focused on student feedback, high feedback for our students. Our teachers studied hard, and we worked hard on our individual needs for our students. Really, everything that you've heard from every school, that's what's going on in our building as well. We stayed focused on having a deep understanding of learning, how students learn, and then develop those strategies to make sure that learning took place. We really focused on having some strong, powerful relationships with all of our students, knowing what they needed emotionally and academically, just as they spoke to. We focused on all the way down to the skill level, what each student would need. That's where our focus on our standards went into place, our essential standards. We teach to mastery. We learned the hard way that, if you wait until a summative assessment to see how well students have learned, you've missed the boat. So we really worked on our formative assessments that we created to make sure that our students were learning along the way.
So, and how did you really deal with like the teacher fatigue and all of this? I mean, that's asking a lot of people during this pandemic to do all of these things. So how do you address that?
It was my most difficult year. This is my 19th year as a principal, and it was very difficult. But when you have a staff who loves what they do and they're highly effective in the classroom, it's just a natural thing that happens. But it was a challenge, but I think our teachers rose to the top, and I'm blessed to work with the greatest staff in Arkansas.
Congratulations, and thank you for being here today. All right, let's go to our next one. We've got Eureka Springs High School. And so this is 2 of our Eureka Springs schools that have been up here today. So increasing by 1 letter grade and increasing your overall ESSA school index by 6 points. You went from a B to an A. Was also recognized for increasing their overall ESSA school index score by 8.26 points and improving their weighted achievement score by 22.78 points. Woo! Somebody was working. And for scoring 85.08, which is 2 standard deviations above the mean, which is impressive in your value added growth. So introduce yourself, David, and we're going to talk a little bit about all this accomplishment.
I'm David Gilmore with Eureka Springs High School. This is my 6th year to be the principal there.
So talk to me about how you set these high expectations for your students and your teachers to actually achieve this improvement.
So we're a very blessed community. If you haven't ever been to Eureka Springs, you need to come up and visit us. It's a very accepting community, a very loving community, and the culture there is really strong to support each other. The community supports our school, and so we make sure we try to turn around and support them back. But we have a one-unit philosophy in our school. We all stand together. Everyone's a part of it everywhere, from the bus driver that brought the student in to the custodian that helps us keep the buildings amazing, to the teachers and any of the cafeteria staff. We're all there together to be with our students and make sure the students get everything they need. You know, one couple things I've heard a lot of things in here that were very common to what we did last year. You know, we talked about getting back to some normalcy, like Dr. Pfeffer said. I've heard about, you know, social emotional needs, meeting those for our students, holding students accountable, remediation. So I feel like all those things together worked in our favor. We just did a lot of things that really got back to the normalcy of the school year, and really pushed all the different approaches that we knew would help our students. All of our students have advisors daily that help keep track of their grades and attendance. That's something they check weekly and advise those students, so they actually have a time built in during the day that they can go see another teacher and get that extra help that they need for that. We also did a lot of after-school tutoring. We felt like before and after-school tutoring, and we would contact parents and make sure that the parents were on board with getting their kids there early or after school. And a lot of our teachers, once we looked back at that data, they really saw that that was a good approach, that those kids made a lot of growth. Even some that didn't pass the assessment, we still saw that they'd made a lot of growth and were close and really put that work in, so we appreciate that. But, you know, we spent a lot of time talking about our culture. Eureka Springs, we talked about how Eureka Springs is traditionally a school that has academic excellence, and we want to continue in that academic excellence. You know, we're ready to work hard and push through all the different, you know, distractions that we've had over the last few years, and really tried to bring those scores up and to do our best.
So two of the words that stood out to me was really the personalization that your approach, and parent involvement at high school. A lot of high schools across the state really were losing that student engagement piece, and their high school kids were just you know, not connecting. So talk to us a little bit more about student engagement specifically and how you pulled them in. Was it really that culture?
Yeah, a lot of the culture, and like I said, we're blessed to be a smaller school too, so we feel like we can put more time with our students one-on-one. And so, you know, we had a lot of meetings with students, pulling them in and discussing grades with them, discussing their attendance, making sure they were doing all the things that they needed. You know, we just took a no, we just would not accept the fact that you're going to try to fail, or you're not going to get your work turned in, or you're not going to get that extra help that you need. You know, I was very real with the students. I'm actually an alumni of the Eureka Springs School District, so I'm very pleased to be back there as the principal. But, you know, I told those students, you know, hey, sometimes we need that extra help. You know, I was one of those students, it didn't come naturally to me either, and I had to go back and put in the work, and I told them that they can do it as well. And we all just pushed forward and had an excellent year, and just very blessed to have a staff and students and teachers that have worked so hard, and a community that backs us the way they do.
Well, congratulations, and thank you for being with us today. I think this is a point where we're going to take a break, but I saw you over here scribbling some notes or anything. Did you want to say anything to the principals? Anything stand out to you that you want to?
I was just taking notes, so in case anybody ever asks me, hey, how can we do something, I can say, well, you need to go talk to Mr. Gilmore at Eureka Springs High School. I mean, y'all are doing a great job. And Ms. Meister, I mean, our trip to your school where we got to go take the state board, I mean, we were blown away. I wish we could take a visit to all these schools that we're featuring here today. But really appreciate the dedication that you individually put into this work, because I know as a leader, I'm always going to shine the light on my team, and that's what y'all did here today. And that's so I appreciate you. I appreciate your teams. I appreciate your leadership, and look forward to highlighting this work over the next few months, because Ms. Kaufman is going to be, and her team is going to be putting this information out so that we can tell the story about success in Arkansas across a number of districts, geographic regions, demographic, differences. You name it. I mean, it's featured right here. So great job, and I appreciate the great work that y'all are doing.
Okay, so we're going to do thank you guys for being here today. We appreciate it. We're going to do a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and get going again. Thank you.
Okay, if everyone will start coming back. We're going to go ahead and have our superintendent panelists come up, and we'll get to your part in just a minute. And I know as we introduced some of our principals a while ago, we hit on some of the superintendents who were there with principals, but we probably did not get everyone. So I want to just take this time right here. If you are a superintendent and you came with your principal today, or if you're a superintendent in a district that you came to hear and support, if you'll stand up, we want to recognize you. So I know from talking to a couple of people, they're getting a little nervous as their principals talk because they realize there might be some talent scouting going on. So anyway, some of you might get your contracts looked at soon. I don't know. But no, this is really, I'm very, very proud to be an educator in Arkansas and part of just be able to be here with all of you. Another group of people I want to recognize are our Department of Education staff members. So if you will stand up, I know we got a lot of team members here. Some of them got them back here. I want our team members to stand up out in the audience. And two ladies that are in the back, Tiffany Grayer and Abby Kress. The logistical parts of this would not have been possible without those two ladies. And then Tiffany leads the team that does all the work behind the scenes. So I really want to brag on her. And we also have a lot of partners here from, we have partners from our other organizations, the Education Association. We have them here with us, if you'll stand up and be recognized. AEA. Yeah. Carol and Liz are here with us, and we appreciate that. And I believe we have our co-ops. We have representatives here from almost every co-op. So if y'all want to stand or wave. Yeah. So in addition to the host, the directors, teacher center coordinators from the others have come out in force. We also have AAEA. Dr. Hernandez is here, and so is Lynette. And I believe Rural Education. Yeah, we have Dennis Copeland here. So, and I hope I did not leave anybody out. But just, and obviously, most importantly, AETN, the partnership with them, this takes a lot of work. They're doing a great job for us and capturing this. So we've already had others texting, talking about, we're enjoying watching this. So again, I want to say thank you, and I'm just proud to get to be here with you. So we're going to jump right back in. And just briefly pause on the another component of our accountability system, graduation rates. And it is obviously a tremendously important component. And the success of these graduation rates, the success of students graduating on time, that doesn't start in 9th grade. That starts back at the very beginning, and that's what you heard a while ago from the principals. That spanned all the way, goes into those opportunities at our pre-K all the way through our high school, and having all of those opportunities in between. So just pausing here for a second on the graduation rate averages, Denise, it would appear that there's not a lot of dramatic changes with our graduation rate. Is there something significant or important that we ought to take away from this?
Yes. I think the fact that they are stable is really important. I remember TAC meeting a couple of years ago when our TAC members, our technical advisory committee members, said, "Oh, you really you need to keep an eye on graduation rates, because a lot of us are expecting to see those dip in many states, and we really haven't seen that. We've had just a slight, point here, point there, or hundredth of a point or tenth of a point, but for the most part, our rates have really stayed very stable at a time of huge instability. And so I think that's something that, if you look at the numbers, you may not really be thinking about that, but that's a statement in and of itself. And to continue to do so, many of our technical advisory committee members also mentioned they thought they would see a lagging impact on the rate 2 to 3 years out, and so far we're still really holding steady, and it couples well with one of our indicators in school quality and student success, and when we get to that one we can talk a little bit more.
Now, something that is not technically part of the accountability system right now, but has had a lot of conversation over the last few years, and we expect to be part of future accountability systems, would be the impact that career and technical education has on overall success of students. And so we put this slide in. We've got our leadership from our Division of Career and Technical Education here. But what this slide shows is some research that Denise has been doing with them over the last few years around CTE concentrators. And those are students who take a foundation course and at least another course within a career pathway. And when you look at concentrators, they are in the blue. Am I correct in that? The concentrators would be represented by that blue line, and you can see their graduation rate is significantly higher than even when we look at all students or non-concentrators. So that was data back from 19, 20, and 21. We'll continue to be looking at that, but we think that just having that data, those are going to be something very important. So really looking at what are the causes for that. Those students, the concentrators, we've heard from 2 of our high school principals today who commented on the importance of career and technical education in terms of engagement and providing those opportunities for students. So just kind of throwing that out there as something we're probably going to want to talk about more. But that as we have a robust data system that we're able to know all of this, it's going to help inform those decisions in the future. So we're going to go on into the next component of our accountability system, which has several subcomponents, SQSS, which stands for School Quality and Student Success. And so there's, like I said, there's several different things that count in this component, and it depends on the school grade level and the grade level of the students as far as how those criteria are included into ultimately a school's overall as a school index. I remember when we were getting all of our stakeholder feedback, these were those things that kept emerging. And when people would say, we want our accountability system to be more than just a test score, we want it to look at these other criteria. And I believe, Deb, you mentioned a while ago, but we also had to make sure they were things that could be measured and things that would be consistent no matter which school, how we collected that data. It was done in a streamlined and systematic way. And so we have some school superintendents here today that are going to just talk a little bit about, because this really does span the entire K-12 spectrum, and they're going to be talking a little bit about kind of what they've learned as they've looked at their school performances overall, kind of how some of these things play in, some things that they're learning as they really go further into their data. But before we get into their individual questions, Denise and Deb, I'm going to pause here because this is probably where we've had the most conversations about the data. And some of this is probably where we're seeing the lagging effects of COVID. So I'm going to hand the mic over to you all to talk for a minute about what should we take away from this, because while we saw those increases in the weighted achievement, we're not seeing that so much here. So talk to us a little bit about that and how that's playing into the overall picture.
Well, I'll start with some of the conversations. I've had a lot of conversations with superintendents about these scores, and in the SQSS indicator, while it's only 15% of the overall score, it really does speak to opportunities. Are we giving all kids opportunities? And the first opportunity is coming to school. And so what does our attendance data really tell us? And are we collecting it correctly? Are we reporting it correctly? Our business rules rely on certified data. You know, maybe there's been turnover in the staff and things aren't being done exactly the way we thought they were being done. And so it really gives us an opportunity to examine all of our systems, first of all, and to really think about, you're going to hear some great stories today, talking about what are we really learning from this. So it starts with opportunity, and then Denise?
I think the other thing that this really tells us about is we know we've been through a pandemic. We know some students haven't come back. We know some students have come back and have more challenges than others because of the situations that they've been in terms of learning. And so each of these different components gives us information that helps us to really assess, are we seeing a lagging impact of the pandemic? What could we be doing to make a difference with this? Who is and who isn't having the same recovery or rebound, and for what reasons? And so there are elements of this, for example, on-time credits. In 2021, on-time credits at the state level was down tremendously, and that's, do we have students earning enough credits at each grade level, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, to be ready to graduate? But that particular indicator has rebounded in 2022. And then I think also about AP, IB, and concurrent credit. That's about access to opportunity and access to rigorous learning. And we have seen a bit of a decline in that. And so, you know, in that case, my question is really more to the local folks. Are you seeing that happen? And if you're seeing that happen, what might be some of the causes of that? And that's where engaging students in finding those answers could be really helpful.
All right, so I think that leads us into exactly the conversation that we're getting ready to have with our superintendents. And so first question is with Dr. Jeremy Owa, who's superintendent at Jacksonville North Pulaski. And Dr. Owa, I know that after you all had your data and you really started looking at some things, you became aware maybe of some missed opportunities. You became aware of some things that you all hadn't really been looking at as closely. And so you are really going in now and reviewing all of your your SQSS components for all your schools. So talk to us a little bit about kind of what you've learned and some of the things you're doing differently now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, so we started the school year with the goal to individualize our interventions and supports for all of our scholars. And every month, we have these action research days with our school leaders, their guiding coalitions, the district guiding coalition, as well as our department leaders, where we look at the data and we try to emulate what the state has done with the plan, do, check cycle inquiry. And so when we received our preliminary data from our scores and letter grades, it was more so not just me, but it was an aha moment for my school leadership teams, my guiding coalition teams, when they realized that with the SQSS indicators, you mean if we would have moved these students to this category, we would have gained these additional points. Or if we had a strong attendance policy, the school level team started to really look at our district-wide policies and how they impact our SQSS indicators and scores. And so they started that conversation. And one of the most important conversation that came out of that was from our high school guiding coalition team when they looked at their community service, learning service scores. And they were like, well, Dr. O, we're doing this. Our teams, our classes, our students, our scholars are doing these tasks. They're in a community. And we had a plan. But what we realized is that we were not submitting the appropriate documentation. And so we were missing out on those points in that particular indicator because of just not following behind and making sure those reports were being filed and making sure that we were documenting it. And even with the cohort groups, we realized that we needed a better system in documenting when our scholars left us in 9th grade and 10th grade and not wait to try to find where they went their 11th and 12th grade year. And so just making sure we had more concise processes and procedures, that was really the conversation, which the schools had that conversation more than the district having it with the schools.
So a couple of things you said that stood out is that you all have had the realization that, okay, we may have some district policies that need to be revisited because it may not be the type of policy that's supporting what our goal really is. So that I think is important. But then you've really talked about your what would we call those, Ms. Kaufman, standard operating procedures, and really developing those and following those. But I think what's exciting is from what I hear you say, you're not having to be there telling them this is what you'll do. They're figuring that out and coming to you all as a district for that support, which is the very heart of what we want this system to be. So, all right. Thank you for that. If anybody wants to do any follow-up, just please let me know, because there's a lot of these things that are going to loop back around together. I know one of the things that at least 3 of you have talked about, particularly with the SQSS, was the student engagement component. And when we looked at that graph early on that showed how many more students statewide last year who were at risk for chronic absences. And that obviously affected the student engagement overall scores. And so we look at this, but now, Denise, this piece is a small piece of the overall. So can you talk to us just a little bit about, obviously this is important and it's critical, but it's also important to look at it in the right context. So can you briefly describe what we're looking at here?
Sure. And one thing to remember, we don't use attendance rates because attendance rates across the state are pretty uniform. What we do is use, based on the research that talks about students missing a certain number of days or a certain percentage of time, the student engagement component of SQSS is really tied to that research. So we know from the research that students who miss more than 10% or 10% or more are at high risk of not having the successes. And so that's why the way this is put together, you're getting points for students. For every student that's there for 95% of the time or more, you're getting a full point. And then if they are at what we call moderate risk, between 90 and 95, you're getting half a point. And the reason for doing that instead of attendance is it really does differentiate, and it also calls out that in order for these students to be learning, they've got to be engaged. And so we have a really wonderful definition of absence that I think at the state level is really helpful because kids can be engaged in learning in a lot of different ways. And the idea there is if they're engaged, then they're making the progress we need them to make. So this indicator is really intended to help you figure out who is really at high risk or moderate risk, and for what those reasons might be. Are there things that you can do to intervene?
Okay, so next we'll hear from the superintendent at the Bryant School District, Dr. Karen Walters. One thing, if you know Karen is a problem solver. And so when she had questions about some of her data, we started talking through, and as she became more aware, she started coming up with the solutions to the problems. And so I'd like for her to talk a little bit about how they're thinking around the student engagement piece. And what some things they're putting in place, but I also do want to know, just from the chart here, she has several elementary schools that are being recognized for their improvements in their overall ESSA School Index and also weighted achievement. So those are important things to highlight too. So Karen, we'll let you talk to us for just a minute about this.
Well, Dr. Pfeffer, I think that was a nice way for you to say that you hear from me a lot, I think is what that was, which is true. So I think for us, you know, we had the first 5 minutes when we got the drafts of pointing out all the things from last year and all of the, you know, trying to come up with why it was like this. And at first we thought that our absences included all of our COVID absences. And after we dug into that, we found out that that wasn't the case. We also looked at a spreadsheet that we had, that we kept up with for COVID last year, that had over 9,000 rows in the spreadsheet. That was kids and staff members that we had that either had COVID or they were quarantined, and we had thousands and thousands of days of absences. So after we got over our, you know, talking about you guys behind your back about, you know, all the things that are wrong with this, we quit looking out the window and put the mirror up and said, okay, so it's time to look at this and fix the things that we need to fix. And we picked one elementary school and we really dug into their attendance, and we decided we were going to look at our one of our higher poverty elementary schools. They also have a higher EL population for Bryant, and it was it's pretty alarming what we saw. We have another school within the district that's very low poverty, and we had some attendance issues there for different reasons. We have a lot of Disney World trips in the middle of the year, gone for a week. So it's different types of absences, but you know, especially at our high poverty school, we also had to get to the point where we weren't just looking at it about the point for the accountability system, but especially at that school, all the research tells us that those students, you know, typically don't have the support at home, and so if they're not with us, we're not going to have them at grade level reading. So I think that's the much bigger picture and takeaway from the absences than just looking at trying to get our points. The SQSS scores for us, I mean, they dipped, you know, dramatically. For our high school, another thing that we did look at was the community service learning, and for us, it wasn't just an issue about documentation, it just wasn't there, and part of it was a lot of our partners that our kids, you know, had gone to in the past, it just wasn't allowed because of COVID, but, you know, that was pretty minor in the scheme of things. But we also looked at some district policy issues around attendance. Last week, our juvenile judge in Saline County met with all the Saline County superintendents, and we had some really good conversations about, you know, here's some things that we're thinking about. Ask him his opinion. I said, I know you can't speak for all juvenile judges in the state, but, you know, the current law is attendance is by semester, and it's been that way forever. And I don't know why it's been that way. A school year is a school year, and why can you miss 20 days first semester and then you start over second semester? And that's in law. So I think that, you know, we started looking at some of our antiquated laws and policies that we have, and, you know, trying to start having some conversations. We also talked about our district calendar. I think we've got to start having some conversations of what that looks like. Please, anyone from Bryant that's watching, I'm not saying we're doing this. I'm saying we need to start conversations, and I talked to our PPC about this on Monday, that, you know, I think it's time to look at a year-round calendar. We had those conversations about having those breaks throughout the year, so maybe, you know, if we had that break in the fall and families could do their vacations when it was cheaper, they wouldn't miss school and go during that time. I think it would help teacher morale. I think it would help us do some better point in time intensive remediation for students. So I think it's just time to have those conversations. I think that's something we've got to visit with our community about, because that's really moving everyone's cheese. But I think we've got to stop looking at, well, this is the way we've always done it. Our calendar's based on back when kids had to get out of school and work the fields. And like I said, we need to start looking at things differently. So that was just kind of how our conversations have gone.
So I think it's just knowing that this conversation within an individual school and the district, and then spreading it out to the superintendents in the area, and the support from the juvenile judge, and that understanding and having that conversation. I think, again, that is the cycle of inquiry. That is taking that data and moving in and out with all the parts that need to be there. So you've brought up some interesting ideas and I know some interesting conversations you're having in your district. I'd be curious with either one of you. I know just thinking about providing those additional support for students, or those additional times to accelerate learning. Were you able to see success with some of the work you've done with either summer school or after school using your ESSER funds? Have you seen any results from that yet, maybe?
We have in Jacksonville, one of the things that we noticed that the students, our scholars who attended the academy or the summer enrichment academy during the summer, their initial assessment at the beginning of the school was higher. They performed higher on that initial assessment than our scholars who did not opt into any other enrichment camps this summer.
So we have not really been seeing great results with summer school. We did not do summer school this past year. We've tried to beef up our before and after school tutoring during the school year. We did 3 to 4 weeks in the summer. It's hard for us to get teachers to do any more than that. They need a break, the kids need a break. So I think that's another reason to maybe look at a different type of calendar, to not have such a long period of time where kids are out of school to help with that slide. But we're shifting our focus a little bit as far as, like I said, doing during the school year RTI. We have just not seen great results with summer school.
All right, well, we're going to move on to another really important component. This is part of the SQSS indicator, and it's a little different look at the reading at grade level. And so let me pause there. Reading at grade level, what is this component measuring, Denise, and what should we take away from the information here?
Reading at grade level is looking specifically at students meeting that readiness mark. And the idea behind that is there's just a ton of research that shows that if we have our kids at grade level in reading, they're ready to go to the next level and do what comes next. Particularly, we know from the science of reading how important it is at the early levels, but it continues to be important for kids to be able to access learning as they go on. So this is a strict percentage of students with a reading score that actually are at the ready level, and we saw a beautiful rebound in reading scores coming out of the pandemic, and it's you can see that in the charts when you compare 21 to 22. We're not quite where we were before the pandemic, but we're on our way as long as we continue that attention to that for every child.
Another important indicator with regards to reading, and so this is a little different part. This is based on state statute, but all of this, again, works together. All these different parts of the accountability system come together, but there was legislation passed in the 2019 session, I believe, and this was about making sure that districts that had a high percentage of students or a high percentage of students in the lowest category, in the in need of support category for reading, would then be identified as in need of support level 3 or level 4 directed support. And so today we have a district superintendent with us, Dr. Lisa Kazires here. And she is going to talk a little bit about what has transpired in the Western Yell County School District over the past couple of years. You can see from their slide, they've got recognition for letter grade improvement, overall ESSA score, weighted achievement at both the elementary and the high school. But I have her situated in this part of the segment because the district also moved from level 4 directed support for reading to completely exiting. So that meant they had over 50% of their students who were in the lowest category. Remember back at the different levels, over 50% year before last in that lowest category, and they moved their students, and I believe last year the results were maybe had dipped down below 40% of students. So that is tremendous progress, and it shows how much can be done in a relatively short amount of time. But she's going to talk about her district and the work that's gone on, and I think you've got some people here with you today too that you want to brag on.
I definitely do. I was not actually there last year, so this is my first year there as superintendent. Miss Dina Klaus was there, and she did a wonderful job leading this, but so did our principals who are here, and our curriculum specialist who's also here. They just like our state, I'm very proud to be in Arkansas, and I'm also very proud to be at Western Yale County, and that is because we didn't deny where we were. We were honest about where we were. Like I said, this was before I came. However, you know, they didn't try to hide from the data. They didn't try to say this isn't where we are, you know, or be in denial or anything to that nature. They said this is where we are. We're going to be honest about where we are, and then we're going to look at what can we do to get where we want to be. And so that was done through support. That was done through starting of PLCs and working on the vision and the mission and the culture and all the things that you've heard from everyone else before me, that has said that, you know, you have to dig into what is it that we want kids to know and be able to do. How are we going to know that they know that and they're able to do that? And then what are we going to do if they don't? And what are we going to do if they do? And so we looked at individual students. We knew that we had to move students that were at the lowest level that we could no longer, whether we were before or not. But in many places, you've looked at the students that were easy to cross over the line and become ready, because that was where you got your bang for your buck. And so I've said many times that we do have an adequacy measure, and we do want people to meet that bar, but we shouldn't care how much that they exceed. We want them all to exceed and be exceeding and to continue that exceeding. And so you have to move students who are in need of support to close before they're going to be ready. They're not going to move, most likely, from in need of support all the way to ready. So we focus on every single student, and we involved the students. It takes telling the students where they are, what their data says, and what it is that they need to do, and then having them work with teachers to do that. So I'm blessed to work with a wonderful faculty and with wonderful students and a wonderful community that does dig in to look at that data and then try to figure out what we need to do to get there. And it's not always easy. We do come also from a background of 90% poverty, and so that's what our free and reduced lunch status is. And so that is hard. It's not always easy. And just knowing that you're at that low level and that you have these things to do and all the work that's going to have to take place to get you there isn't going to get you there. It's going to take a whole lot of work. And I'm blessed with a faculty that is not scared of the work, and they're still continuing to do lots of that and work as hard as they can to have those high expectations and to make sure that students are meeting those standards.
I started to say, I've now looked down at my scripts because I panicked because but I have my script. So yes, would you have your principals, would you introduce your principals, and then I want to actually talk about their individual school improvements.
Yes, I think I turned it off. Maybe I got cut off. Miss Tanya Parsons is our elementary principal, and Miss Julie Lane is our curriculum specialist. She works at both buildings. And then Mr. Scott Smith is our high school principal. And we, like I said, I'm very blessed to have inherited them. So I couldn't have chose better by myself. And y'all can't have them, so keep your hands off.
Yeah, okay. So let me just tell you really quickly. Both of these schools will be recognized as schools on the move. The Western Yale Elementary, they increased one letter grade. They increased their overall ESSA school index score by 9.88 points, and they improved their weighted achievement score by 15.74 points from 2021 to 22. So excellent. The high school also being recognized by increasing their overall ESSA School Index score by 6.54 points from 21 to 22, and improving their weighted achievement score by 12.7 points from 21 to 22. So let's give them a round of applause. And as Lisa talked about, they did, in 2021, they had 52.66% of their students in the in need of support category for reading. In 2022, that was reduced to 39%. A tremendous change in that data, and I know from just what you've talked about there that you all are going to continue to move those students. So we're really proud of that result for you. Oh, he didn't. Let me bring you a microphone. So.
Get up and come over here to Johnny.
Yeah. I just want it to be, I don't want it to be overlooked that you have examples here of large districts and a small district. And when I say small, I mean, below 350, and everybody in the room knows what list you get on when you go below 350 for 2 years. And you're not close to anybody. You're not. Western Hill is out in the middle of farm country, and so it can be done. And that's what I want to point out. I mean, to say, well, we're a small district, so we struggle. You're going to struggle, and I'm sure y'all struggle, but you find a way to get through it. And in the bigger districts, I mean, I know y'all have challenges too, but Dr. O, I was looking at your numbers, and your enrollment has gone up 400. You dipped a little bit during COVID, but you're up over 4,200 students for this year. I don't know if you were planning on having that many when you went to Jacksonville North Pulaski, but you're almost 100% turnover with new buildings now because of a unique situation that y'all are in. And Dr. Walters, y'all have been growing and expanding your facilities as well. So you've got growth districts, large districts. You've got a small district that has seen a decline. But just want to point out that it doesn't matter. You can find ways to overcome those obstacles because they are obstacles. And then I'll save Dr. Long in a minute.
So another thing I want to point out about Western Yale too, and Amy had sent this to me, was they're a SOAR grantee, so our literacy grant for the state, they're a recipient of that, and they implemented an intervention program at the secondary and high quality instructional materials for professional development support at the elementary. And we think that is so important with science of reading to have that high quality instructional materials piece, have that really intense intervention curriculum, and have that PD to support folks. So I think, that's just another indicator of doing the right work. So congratulations.
Okay, it's good to get up and move around. All right, so we're going to, we do have the additional components of the SQSS that Denise mentioned. These are around community service learning, taking advanced courses, how students do on the ACT exam. And so when we look at these and just in talking about it, we know those have been kind of uneven in terms of where we are every year. But a lot of these, I think we can make a direct tie to attendance and to, just changes that were put in place during the pandemic. But as we come out of this, again, important to be looking at every student and what opportunities are they being afforded, and what's going on with them, if they're on track and on time. So we're going to go ahead and move on in now to the school rating portion of the accountability system, because all these things come together and culminate into how a lot of this is messaged to parents and to our communities. And we can debate all day. Letter grades, are they good? Are they not good? Do we like them? Do we not like them? And the reality is, though, we know that letter grades are something people do understand. And so when we look at this, we put all of this together. So this chart here is all the letter grades for all the schools, all 1,056 schools. I wish we could have done it where it would be animated, so you could have seen 2018, which is in blue, then 2019, and then 2020. So we'll work on making that, because what happened between 2018 and 2019 was you saw a shift in 2019 to the left. So we had more schools that were scoring or receiving a letter grade of A, B, or C in 2019 than we did in 2018. And when it's compared even against 2017, there were changes. So we were making progress in terms of more schools having higher scores. We know in 2020 we didn't have any assessments, so we didn't have any data. We did have our data in 2021, but we didn't have a letter grade. So we did pause the letter grades in 2021 as we were coming out of the pandemic. So this year's letter grades, I think it's important to think about, okay, we're looking at 2022 letter grades. If we're trying to compare them to 2019 letter grades, that may not be the best way to compare because of all these things that we've talked about. And those individual indicator impacts. But again, it does give you a picture of where we are in terms of letter grades, and this is overall. When you go in and you're looking at the data, and you all will be digging into the data too, whether you're at the school level, at a co-op, or within another entity. You'll want to also think about, okay, what do those ratings look like by grade span? Okay, we have a lot more elementary schools in the state. You can go back and look at that chart that I showed you at the beginning. So you've got a lot more elementary schools than you do high schools. So the letter grade numbers and how that plays out, that is going to look different. So you're going to want to look at those by grade span, and also note that when we talk about grade spans, there are different cut scores for elementary than for middle school and for high school. And we could spend a whole lot of time talking about all these grade ranges. What I'll just share with you, and especially those in the public, we have a lot of grade spans, and every school is unique. We have elementary schools that are K4, we've got elementary schools that are K5, we've got elementary schools that are P6, we've got, so all these grade ranges here could represent an elementary school in Arkansas. And so this is the grading scale that's used in determining those letter grades. So if we've got information here as you look at this presentation, you know, to look at what did those differences look like from the rating for elementary between 2019 and 2022. There's your middle school, fewer ranges, but still a lot of different configurations that could comprise how an individual school is rated. So you can see some of the changes there. And then for high schools, and in some cases, if we have a small K-12 campus school, then they would be using this grading scale, which is slightly different than others would be. So I know I went through all of those, but that information will be out there as far as letter grades and what they look like. But I wanted to give time for our final panelist to talk a little bit about his district. And one of the things that struck me is in talking with Dr. Long, who's the superintendent at Mountain Home, was he talked a little bit about, as a district, what is it like when you have different schools within your district that have different letter grades? Because, you know, it's you want to be excited and celebrate when you have schools that had improvement, but then when you have a school that declines, you've got a little bit of, okay, so how do we support them? How do we talk about this? But then also something he said is, we've got to look at that decline and see what impact that decline is going to have in the next few years on this school that just improved. So why did this school improve? Why did this school decline? What all is going on there? So I wanted him to talk a little bit about the conversations that he has in his district and the things they've thought about, and then in particular the couple of things that they really focus on that probably are that sustainable foundation. So Dr. Long.
Well, first of all, I do appreciate the opportunity to talk about Mountain Home. There's nobody I love talking about more than Mountain Home Public Schools. So in Mountain Home, we are structured in a grade level centers, and so we're centers K-12, meaning we have a kindergarten campus. We have a separate campus that is a first and second grade campus. Then we have an intermediate school, and so all of our students, as opposed to the community schools approach, all of our students travel up, through the systems. And so the discussion that you just had regarding the configurations does complicate things and messaging that with our public. So we did see a letter grade increase within our career academies, which represent grades 8 through 12. But the overall index score of our career academies was actually lower than one of our schools that may had received a lower grade or even declined. And so being able to talk about that to parents and the public is complicated. So the approach that we really took and are taking this year is from the start of the year, we said this school year needs to be fun and engaging. And so taking that approach early on really kind of set the path for us diving into, and when I say fun and engaging, then that starts getting the conversations with our educators to individualize students' data. And so the index scores and the assessments that are behind all of that are important, and they were important for us as we began creating our student success plans and then having our student success team meetings. And so a couple months ago, I invited our Board of Education to go and sit down at our first and second grade building and sit in with our teachers as they're having those in-depth conversations with around our student success teams. And so what they got to see is the templates that we use internally. They got to see the highs, which were coded blue, and the lows, which were color-coded red. And for our board to be able to recognize the extreme challenges that our teachers are struggling with in the areas of differentiating instruction was an eye-opening conversation to them, and the number and the span there. But it also highlighted the need for the support and resources in us individualizing our instruction. So beyond that, we continued with our focused instruction through our collaborative teams, answering the 4 questions, just like everybody else talked about here today. At the secondary level, we recognized during COVID that our students were not fully capitalizing on the opportunities that we very much pride ourselves in Mountain Home. All the AP course offerings, all the concurrent credit offerings, all of the career and technical pathways that we have. And they weren't fully, and we moved away from requiring that full load as a senior because we wanted more space in our schools as in that senior year for distancing purposes. So we did have to make a policy change to bring that about. And so that allows us to continue to lean into the workforce development pieces that we have through the CTE and through also our pathways model. Those pathways, they provide career awareness, exposure, exploration, and then ultimately experiences in those internships, in those apprenticeships. And really I feel like that not only do those contribute to a skilled workforce, but they also are, just like others have talked about, key engagement pieces in keeping our kids there at school. So that's kind of our story. That's how we are leaning into those different pieces.
So I really love how you bring us back to the student success plans and extend that, all the way down to that elementary level. So I think a lot of people would be interested in what those student success team meetings look like and how that works together. But also just that recognition and understanding that the things that we did during COVID in order to help keep kids safe, those are practices that quickly become normalized if we're not careful, and we have to have the courage to stand up and say, no, we're missing out on opportunities now. So let's go back, let's reset our policies, and really focus on re-engaging kids. So, comments? Okay.
I'll get up. Johnny, you stay right there.
We can stand.
Yes. So one of the things we heard about over and over during was the wellness of teachers, the wellness of staff and students, and the struggle about coming back to school. Jake, you were a guest speaker at Thrive, and the investment that you've made in personnel. I'd like for you to touch on that a little bit because I think it's important. I know, Karen, I was at one of your schools the other day celebrating a blue ribbon, and they talked about the leader in me. They talked about capturing kids. I mean, they were talking about all these different programs that the outcomes had academic success, but they really were growing people. So, Jake, if you'll just kind of comment on some of those things and the investments you've made in that area.
Yeah, so really, and that all boils down to having the right people in the right seat on the bus within our organizations. And so you get people that are very, very good at what they do, and then you just get the opportunity to say yes a lot. And so with those situations, we have an incredible school-based mental health support person and coordinator with Mr. Matt Sutton. We have a great school counselor there that's taken on really taken on the Thrive initiative and organizing that from a district standpoint. But we are starting to see some definite instructional value, which is ultimately what we're trying to do here, right? I mean, we're trying to support the behaviors and the increasing behaviors that we're seeing there so that our teachers can be as effective instructors as they possibly can for those kids. And so all of those things, whether we're talking about our school-based mental health services, the Thrive Initiative, the Guide for Life curriculum, we have a local program that supports behavioral intervention systems, BIST. And so all those things are working together to make the job on our teachers manageable. We saw well on that we needed to be in tune to their obviously their needs and support them through that. And so I do feel like that those initiatives are going to pay great dividends in the future.
So I have a question for all of you, because we started this segment talking about graduation rate, but we know that it's a lagging indicator, and it's a culmination of the previous 4 to 5 years, depending on when students start accumulating those graduation credits. Knowing that it's a lagging indicator, knowing that you have students that when the pandemic hit were in maybe 6th grade or 7th grade, and the engagement issues that may have kicked in because they were in middle school or junior high. Do you have any words of encouragement, words of caution, or anything that you would convey to your fellow superintendents and other school leaders on how to make sure that you use all these elements of SQSS to ensure that those students, those scholars, either get re-engaged or stay engaged through their entire high school experience?
We're all sitting here looking at each other, so we'll pass the microphone around. Ultimately, that's very near and dear to me is career and technical education. And so those opportunities are ultimately the why behind our kids showing up for school. And so us creating a K-12 pathway that starts those engaging career opportunities, as early as even kindergarten, creates, some additional why.
For us, the pathways as well. We started at Jacksonville with the college and career academies at the high school level. Now that we have that established, our goal is to push that down to our middle school into our elementary schools so that we can engage our entire district, all of our scholars, along with our parents, community members, business community, in that pathway. One of the things that we continue to do is provide that guidance to our community and even our staff and students, that all of our students are not going to matriculate to a four-year institution. So what are we going to do to make sure that all of them, when they walk across the stage, they have a plan of action and they know exactly what they're going to do when they complete their educational experience with us. And that's where the college and career academies, the internships, we just did the 4 districts in Central Arkansas just had a 9th grade career fair where all of our 9th graders were downtown Little Rock, and to see the engagement in our young people just interacting with the business community was enough to see that we should have been doing this a long time ago. We should have been able to give them the opportunities, make sure that they have the opportunities, and then educate and prepare them for those opportunities. And so that engagement, and it was mentioned earlier, goes past what we do in the classroom. It's really showing them the value of that educational experience.
I think there's probably several components. I think they've probably hit on several. For us, you know, the social emotional program has been really a district-wide initiative over the past several years, and I think that that is so important, because if our students don't feel like that we care about them as people, they're not going to be engaged. They're not going to come to school. The achievement's not going to be there. I think that we've got to continue and not let the foot off the gas on that. I think we've also tried to look at some of our underrepresented populations and what we can do, because they seem to be more disengaged than others. We implemented some new positions this year. We do not have enough bilingual staff, and Brian, as I think is probably an issue with a lot of districts in our state. We use the language line for translation, but having someone at the end of the phone just to say what's going on is not the same thing as having our person to work with those families. So we hired 2, we call them interpreters/liaisons, and they're not just saying what's being said. They're having meetings with our Hispanic families. They're talking about accessing HAC. They're talking about things that we need those families to know, and building those relationships. We also hired 2 mental health therapists. They are not school counselors. They are actual mental health therapists. We also have outside purchase services that we use, but it never seemed like it was enough, and so we're going to try this route. We have a school-based health center so that when kids don't have that PCP and we can't get them what they need, you know, we're trying to look at that to make all of those connections. And one of the biggest things for our high school that we've implemented this year that we won't know yet how it's working, and I actually stole the idea from, we went on the district-wide PLC trip out to Washington. We hired a counselor at the high school that doesn't have the same number of students as our other high school counselors. Bryant High School is almost 2,200 kids on our high school campus, 10 through 12. It's difficult to build those relationships when I have 400 kids when I'm a school counselor. We know that about 10% of their kids took about 50 to 60% of their time. These are students that might have substance abuse issues and other severe issues, and so we restructured so that this school counselor has a caseload of about 60 to 70 students. They have more time to check in with those students that we know that are at risk, that we may lose. And so we don't have the data for that, but we hope that we are going to see some really big gains from that.
And I think for us that the number one factor for having students be there is the teacher. So recruitment and retention is going to be a big one for us. We need to do things to make teachers want to be in the profession. We need to also understand that sometimes things that are on their plate, it's not just about salary and things like that, though those things are important. So a focus that I would like to see us grow more on and delve into would be to ensure that maybe we're growing our own. We've been looking, you know, we have some kids that are going into the teaching through Virtual Arkansas and taking classes that way. And I think that that is something to help our students to see teachers that look like them and to have people who care about our community and what's happening in our community, and they're not going to leave, but that we have to attract them to this field. We want the best and the brightest to become teachers, and we need to work on what that looks like and how we attract them to that. And then for us, as you've said, we have some declining enrollment, so we have to figure out what other things are going to draw students in and make them want to come to class, whether it's CTE, whether it's sports, whether it's whatever that it is, to make them want to come to school every single day and give their best efforts and make them understand what they're doing for themselves for later. Because I don't think they always understand that. They think that they're just learning this class and this, getting this grade and getting out of this class and getting out of that class, that sort of thing. And we need to also understand, like, our co-ops are wonderful for us to be able to help teachers to dig in, because there's no time. There's just not time for teachers to dig into all the things that they need to do to write unit plans and to dig into essentials and to read all of the things they need to know to become professionals at everything that they're trying to do. There's a lot that we're trying to do, and personnel is going to be key, and then getting the best and the brightest drawn to this field.
Well, thank you all, because all of this that you've shared with us is so helpful. So I think what we're going to do now is I'm going to jump ahead to this last slide here. And we'll let the superintendent panel, if you want to go ahead and go back to the audience, we want to invite our steering committee and our state board members to join us here at this table. We might need to scoot a chair up. I think we might be one chair short. But we're going to, the microphones on the table help the viewing audience, but these also help the audience in here. So we're going to pass the microphone around. I know one of the things that's really important for us is to be able to get feedback. So we want to start with getting some feedback from our state board members and our ESSA steering committee. I'm going to let Ms. Kaufman facilitate some of that feedback, and Secretary Key also. But while everybody's convening at the table, I want to just have this slide here. What do we do now? And the image there in from a car, and you may have heard this before, but it just sticks with me. But there's a reason why your windshield is much bigger than your rearview mirror. Okay? You need to be seeing where you're going. Now, it's important to know what's behind you or what's coming up, but what's behind you. So we know what's behind us. All of this that we've talked about today, these are the data. We know all of that, and that has provided us with really good context for where we are now. What's important right now is, what do we do? And we have this big window in front of us. We've got this huge horizon out here. We've got 476,000 souls in our care. And what is it that we need to be thinking about? What do we need to be doing next to be providing the very best for them? So, Ms. Kaufman, do you want to? All right. Does anybody, or I'll just pass. Anybody want to start? Ms. Newton, do you have anything you want to start with? Okay.
First of all, I want to say thank you for hosting us to Arch Forward. This has been great, and thank you to the department and all those that worked so hard. And I know, Dr. Arola, you had a big hand in all of this too, so thank you for that. But I think one thing that stood out to me today was that this was not just a test and set of test scores that we got back and then let's move on. This is something that's usable, and I'm hearing that districts are using this and going down to the student level, and it's student focused. And the results are, you know, what do we do now? What do we do with this? And one of the things that I think I kept hearing over and over were a couple of things were that the focus on student engagement. You know, students have to be engaged in the impact that had on every one of the levels that we were looking at And I know that you brought out the CTE, the completer data, and how it had an impact on student data. And just as a committee and thinking about the future, you know, we talked about before how the service learning, by putting it in there, that made districts focus on that particular thing for their schools. And if it is in the plan, then it's something that gets focused on by districts. And if it gets focused on by districts, then it starts impacting students, and it starts impacting students' learning. So my question is, as we start thinking about our ESSA plan going forward, is that something that, you know, would take a complete redo? Would that be something that would come as an amendment? Or would that be anything that, you know, because we talked about when we started this, that A, B, and C levels. Is that something that is on our radar for X number of years? So I don't know, Ms. Kaufman, you're shaking your head at me. I don't know if you want to try to answer or.
Yes. So what I can tell you is that we will have to amend our ESSA plan. We do have to amend our ESSA plan because we are changing assessments, and so that will bring about, you know, a ripple effect of amendments. But you're correct. In the very beginning, our stakeholders gave us a long list of things that could be included, and then we had to work through which ones will we have valid and reliable data. And so we knew all along that CTE, we wanted that to be on the list. We just needed to have enough time to get valid and reliable data, and we're getting there. Through our Perkins 5, we're collecting much tighter data. So we just need to do it a little while to feel confident. And so by the time we get to this conversation of, hey, it's time to amend our plan, we're going to have some solid data from CTE to consider.
So that is a win for transformation, because before CTE was separate, you know, it was a separate department. Our data systems weren't aligned. Our Perkins plan was not aligned. So one of the big wins that I think is probably not very well known is that when we developed our Perkins plan, we actually went to our ESSA plan and we aligned those, so that when we were collecting data, we were collecting data that made sense for our ESSA plan and our Perkins plan. And so as now with Regent Sarkar and his team, working with Ross and that team, and Deb and Denise, and bringing together a data system that now we can actually have what we didn't have in 2017 when we submitted, which was a system of collecting the right data that we could submit and know where we stand.
Thank you for allowing me to be here today. Very, very powerful meeting. You know, I really didn't know what to expect, but I tell you, I'm really excited and going to take a lot away from this meeting. One of the things that really stood out to me was the emphasis that was put on the return on investments when it comes to not every student should go to college. I think the concept, one of the very misunderstood concepts is every student should go to college. I represent the business sector, and a lot of emphasis, work really close with the CTE group. I think, you know, we recognize that the importance of every student shouldn't go to college. There's jobs out there, industry jobs, good paying jobs, that don't require a college education. And ultimately what this should be about is providing jobs, providing a great quality of living. And I think, when I think about the industry that I work for, 26 years ago, when the company was founded, was started here in Arkansas, we built that organization with guys that were farming experience and guys that were on a correctional institution. I mean, the guys were actually work release program. And we went on to hire those guys, and we ended up leading not only the country, but North America in production. So we got to be really careful when we think about our future, where we're going. We got to make sure everyone has a voice, everyone counts.
Thank you. I know Secretary Key started with a comment about flexibility and responsibility. And I know as a board, we struggle with that. We struggle with the flexibility part because we can't make mistakes at this level, you know, and that's really hard. But we want to challenge everybody. We want everybody to look at doing things differently. That's, to me, what we need to do, and look at things at a responsible level. So when things come to us, it's tough, and you know, we just really look at things in depth and just hope that we're making the right decisions and being responsible. But it is tough. It's tough because you feel like there's sometimes things aren't always understood, and we're trying, and we work hard at looking at the district level, whether they're big or small or kind of what was said. You know, it's kind of difficult. And another thing that I don't know if I heard much today, but culture. Really looking at the culture piece. How safe do our kids feel? How loved do our kids feel when they go into the school building every day? That makes a huge difference in them being able to learn and feel comfortable. And are we challenging them enough? And providing those services. You know, we've heard today we need to look at it, maybe a different calendar, different ways we're doing things, but thinking back about the students, and when they walk in that building, do they feel loved? Do they feel safe? To me, that's huge. That's a huge piece.
So, as news came out yesterday afternoon and things kind of became official, and news reports that read in the paper today, I was not that excited about today's meeting. But I'm leaving here with a great deal of hope for our schools. And despite bad news and news that we all have to just, the realities we have to face and be sad about in significant parts of the state, what we saw here today is that it doesn't matter what condition you find your school or your school district in. There is a story here that you can learn from. You're a small school district. We heard from them. You're a big school district. We heard from them. You're a poor school district. We heard from them. You're a lot of English language learners. We heard from them. We heard a lot of success stories. Some of the things that I jotted down was that in Yale County, we were honest about where we were and just dealt with that. Grace Hill Elementary, we had to stop blaming the circumstances from which we got our students. Those things mean a lot, that educators were so focused that control the things that we can control. And I was inspired by Sylvan Hills, the detail, and then I heard it over and over today, and the detail for individualized plans for every student was remarkable, and the effectiveness of that. I really think that, you know, as we go into the rest of this year and hope for the future of Arkansas education, it's that we don't have to have excuses. You know, we can just come with a plan, not an excuse. And you can hear these things and not feel guilty for where you are. Just make a plan to make your situation better. We can talk about these things and not point fingers. We can just bring others along to make a plan, to make the learning environments better in their schools. So I'm very much inspired by what I heard today, and very hopeful that the schools and the districts that are finding themselves over the last few weeks and today struggling with the realities, that there's a hope for them. And someone was up here at this table today talking about a way that every school in this state can improve.
Let's give them a round of applause. Good job. I'm really not sure what more I can add to the conversation. I do want to absolutely commend all of the leaders here today. I think Brittany shared a quote, didn't you, that began with the end in mind. I love the quote that everything rises and falls on leadership. And we know that. We know that as leaders, it takes effort. It takes intentional effort on our part to reach a level of success that we hope to reach. I will say this, we have a small number of schools represented here today, but we have a lot of schools across the state of Arkansas who have done a phenomenal job. And you know, we've gone through something that's had a global impact, a global effect on education. And NAEP reported that they had the largest score decline since its inception in 1990. So we've had a lot that we've worked through, and challenges that we've had to work through. I will say that Stacy Smith and I did work together across the hall from one another. We taught together, and we did play a lot of kickball. My class always wanted to beat her class, and it was a challenge because I don't know if you know it or not, but she's a college soccer star. And my class just could not figure out why we couldn't win. But we did, when we taught together, we planned together, and we set our goals high, and we strive to achieve them. Now, I'll admit that there were times when we did not reach our goals, and we were disappointed. I think Secretary Key, you talked about that in the beginning of this meeting, that it's okay to feel disappointed if you didn't reach that level of success that you hoped for. And for all of our classroom teachers that are out there, and our administrators, if you didn't reach the level of success that you hoped for, the thing that I hope that you don't feel is I hope that you don't feel defeated. It's okay to feel discouraged, but we need to see this as an opportunity. I know a lot of letter grades went down based on all that we've been through, and we've talked about that. We've discussed that extensively. But as a state, we just need to see this as an opportunity, because we're going to come back together again next year, and we're going to have conversations. And it's going to be great to be able to show the success that we've had. And so I just hope that everyone avoids that feeling of defeat and just see it as an opportunity. Let it build a fire in you to strive for excellence, and I hope that we're able to do that.
If you've been around me for 5 minutes, you know that I eat, breathe, and sleep CTE. Almost 24 hours a day. One of the things that I found interesting in those slides was that the graduation rate for CTE concentrators, is significantly higher than for other groups. One of the reasons I believe that is because they are hyper engaged, not just in career and technical education, but we were all FBLA, we were all DECA, we were all something. Many times I think that we look at those student organizations. I'm not going to say I've heard the term waste of money, but could that money be spent better elsewhere? And in terms of engagement, I would say no. So I think one of the challenges we're going to have in this group, as Denise continues to collect better data, is that we start to look not just at concentrator data, but engagement data, participation data for our CTSO activities, and as well have some representation in the ESSA score for students who participate in relevant industry internships, career practicums, and those who receive industry certifications. Those are measures of success among a population of students that many times is not reflected in other scores. So I would say that's a challenge for this group, that we work hard on that, and now that COVID is over, we've marched forward at a rapid rate.
I'm the student representative on the ESSA steering committee. I've been here for a few years, and something that I found exciting was, I remember 2016 or 2017 when we were doing the listening forums and going around the state getting feedback. I would visit with a lot of students, and something I reported back to the committee was the most important thing that students found related to their school is the community. And I was glad to hear that y'all spoke about the community, because really and truly, I hate to say it, but students won't remember the material in a few years, but they will remember how their teachers and their classmates made them feel. So the fact that y'all are prioritizing that is really important for students, and also important for, you know, the business aspect that it brings and the important social and emotional learning that provides for students. So I just want to acknowledge that real quick.
So one common theme, and this was already pointed out, was student accountability, or students being a part of their learning. And so that was really good to hear from a lot of our districts and schools, that was I mean, I think I wrote it down on every single person that talked, that was one of the pieces that that was important to them. And then, because it's huge for, like Anthony said, that students participate in their own growth and their own learning, and they're taking accountability, because we see teachers and administrators and staff supporting students to their best of the best of their ability, and they're working extremely hard. But we can't leave the students out of their own learning. That's why we're here. And so that was big. The other common theme that I heard was collective efficacy, right? That we know we can do it. We know we can do it, and we're not going to get beat down by anything that's happened or anything like that. So, and then the last piece was, and of course what I'm most passionate about, are English learners, because that's kind of my focus, but that those students are being supported. All of our English learners are a big population here in Arkansas, and that population is only growing. I know a lot of our districts, especially in my area, are seeing a lot of growth of incoming English learners, and so it is important to make sure that they're feeling that social emotional connection, because if that language barrier is there, then obviously that's going to be part that they can't have access to, and that's important. So then, since I'm the last person, we talked about what do we need to do now. So there's the question transferred. What do we do now? What is next? What's next with our new test? What's next with this accountability system?
Oh, yeah, the mic is hot. Here we go. There are probably some specific things. I mean, Stacy can talk a little bit about, where we are with the assessment. Deb, working on the timeline for the accountability system. But I think really the bigger thing is to start engaging in more of these conversations. What I found as we were pulling all this together is I found myself having to really study and relearn the accountability system and all the nuances and all those details, because we had 2 years where we just didn't really focus. We didn't have these conversations really deeply. So I think really the next is to start getting back to these more regular conversations. Anthony mentioned those listening tours. I think probably re-engaging in those listening tours and talking about, the future of education in Arkansas. So I would expect that as we're transitioning to our new assessment, as we're working through the professional learning community process state to student, that we do have more of these around the state and start pulling in that feedback, so that over, the next several months we've gotten some of these detailed things, because as you said, the work-based learning is a priority now in career and technical education. There are a lot of different elements of work-based learning. And so really helping people to understand, what are we already doing? What might we need to do next? How does that feed in? And is it a replacement for something or something additional? And so that would be my initial response on what do we do now. I'm going to hand it over here to Secretary Key, and we might also have time for a couple of questions for the audience too.
Well, I just want to point out, so Anthony Bennett, when we asked him to be on this team, he was a senior in high school, right? And he has continued with this work through his college career and now as a first-year law student at Bowen. So I just want to acknowledge there are not very many people who would put that level of dedication to this. So Anthony, thank you. I really appreciate your service to the state in that manner. So what's next? What's next is, we've been working on, as we have been working through the accountability system, we've also been working on the revisions to the accountability system. Since day one, we had a list of all those things that you had been suggested to us way back when to say, hey, can you consider this? Could you consider this? Could you consider this? And the answer was yes. We can consider that, but we have to be able to collect it. We have to know what it is, what it looks like. Is it comparable? Is it valid? Does it meet all of the elements? And so we have that list, and we are going through that on a regular basis. When we say plan, do, check, when we put that graphic up there, that's not just for y'all at schools. It's for us too, and we embrace that. So that's part of what's going on. Then the other part of what's going on, as you've heard, is the move to the new assessment, the development of the new assessment. That's going to be a critical component of our next steps. And so I'll let Stacy kind of take over and describe where we are and what some of those next steps are in that process.
So we are in an exciting time for a new assessment. So we will take ACT Aspire again one more time, and that will be this school year. And then next year we'll launch into a new assessment. So we are currently in the process of, we just went through standards revision. Those will be coming to the state board this next month for math and literacy. Okay, so we really went through, they did a very quick revision process because we wanted to make sure that the standards that get approved are what's aligned to the new assessment. And we're not going to, December. Did I say November or tomorrow? You want to sit over there? Yeah. It's not tomorrow. It's next month. Now I've lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? Assessment. So the blueprint. So in the process right now of determining the blueprint based on the revision of the standards, determining what's essential, what do we want to make sure is emphasized in the assessment, and making sure what we heard over and over again was the transparency of what's on the test. School districts know. So that is a priority right now. So in the process at the department of making the blueprint, getting our technical advisory committees, getting feedback, a lot of folks are wanting details. We're in the process of having those discussions, and we've brought in technical experts that are giving us guidance on things we need to think about so that we make sure that we have a system that works. So that is something the department's working on throughout the year. We'll continue to pull in different groups at different times to get feedback and input. But I think it's an exciting time. Denise, is there anything you want to add about it?
I agree. It's an incredibly exciting time, and we're getting the progress on the summative blueprints is going really well, I think, working through some tough conversations. What I think has been really fulfilling in the process is the feedback loops that are happening. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of discussion that takes what's being heard from the classroom to the principal's office, to the curriculum office, to the DTCs, mm-hmm. Parents even, and it's making its way through all of these different conversations and incorporating in the technical pieces that are just so important. So it's super exciting to be able to see all of those pieces come together. Mm-hmm. And, still like you said, still actively seeking feedback on the interim and what does that need to look like and how will that help schools, and one step at a time getting ready.
One of the things, Arkansas is making their tests, so we are having direction on the direction this is going. But this is still a national pool of assessment questions, so we still have a national comparison. But we are making our own blueprint, and that was something we heard over and over again. So there is ownership in that, okay? But we will be able to have that national comparison piece. So again, it is an exciting time, but there is a lot of work. It's not like going to Target and buying it off the shelf and being able to pass it out to everybody. There's a lot of detailed work and technical work. And one of the things, that feedback loop that you talked about, we tried to listen to what people wanted in an assessment system. And then we take it over here on the technical side and we say, can our system really do what they're asking it to do? And if it's not built for that, where do we need to adjust so that what we end up with in the end is good information about students in our school for that assessment? But that's one piece of data. One piece of data, so.
So it is an exciting time, but it's also getting close to the ending time here. So I want to give the audience, we probably have time for a couple of questions if any of our audience members has anything they want to ask. No questions. Stunned silence. We get that a lot. Okay. Okay.
What do you want people to take away from looking at the results? They might just see a letter grade or a few numbers and just kind of not see relation or anything, but what's the main takeaway you want people to view these results?
So it's the same thing we've said from the beginning. This is a conversation starter. Is if you're a parent, if you're a member of the community and you see the letter grades, then we encourage you to contact your school, your principal, your child's principal, superintendent, your board members. This isn't designed to be a labeling mechanism that puts some type of black mark on a school. It's meant to be a tool that helps helps a school improve. And so really starting those conversations, what does it mean? What are the elements? And I think having board members engaged in that conversation is something that's critical as well. But also knowing that all of the elements that make up the ESSA School Index, there are various components of that are important, that work together to make sure that it reflects accurately, what's happening in that building. The other thing that I would say to that is, especially now when we still have federal funds, ESSER funds that are out there, it's not just about the ESSER funds, but it's what are we learning about how we're using those funds that can help us use our other federal and state funds better as we move forward. So I'd say that's another critical part of that conversation. It's a very good question.
I want to say again, thank you to Arch Ford for having us, and I know I've got a captive audience with other co-op directors and co-op people here. From the board perspective, we usually try to get out in a district at least one time a year and visit schools and districts and see what's going on in classrooms. But some of our board members don't always have education backgrounds, and they don't know how valuable you at co-ops are to districts and teachers, and don't know what's going on in co-ops. And so I would like a suggestion. I only have a few months left, but ongoing in the future, maybe the board might consider having also, besides getting out in the schools once a year, maybe getting out in a co-op once a year and actually having our meetings there, having a meeting there and visiting and actually seeing face to face how hard you work every day. And I just don't want it to go unsaid that how much we as a board appreciate what you do as far as training for teachers, support for districts, and I know as a former teacher how many times what I gained at a co-op was so valuable to not just to me but to my students. And so you have an impact on students, and so I would love for board members to be able to see that and to be able to experience that also. So.
Okay, well, I think if there's not anything else, I want to say thank you to our schools here who shared their stories. Thank you for our committee members, our board members who are here to listen and to learn. And I think it's been a really great day. I appreciate what you said, that you weren't excited, but about because you knew what you were coming to hear, and then all of a sudden now you feel like, okay, there's hope. and I feel like we're all ready to re-engage and to continue having these and other conversations. So I think that's what's important. And I appreciate the role everyone plays in helping to make sure our students have those opportunities for success. So, Stacy, Secretary Key, if you want to finish up and close this out, I'll just say I think it's been a great day.
I really do think Jeff had the headline of the day. We're walking away with hope. There is hope in schools. And while we were talking about accountability system and A to F today, that is a snapshot, that is a picture, that is a discussion point, that does not reflect everything that we do in schools every single day. So we're walking away with hope, and there are great things happening. We got Anthony Bent sitting at the table. Talk about the future of Arkansas. It's looking pretty bright.